J M Coetzee's Disgrace, 1999, is a profound, unsettling novel that explores the personal and political dimensions of post-apartheid South Africa. Winner of the Booker Prize, the novel centers on David Lurie, a middle-aged university professor in Cape Town who, after a scandal involving a student, retreats to his daughter's rural farm. What follows is a harrowing journey through disgrace, both literal and metaphorical, in a world undergoing rapid transformation. The novel operates on multiple levels, as a story of personal downfall and redemption, as a meditation on power and ethics, and as an allegory for a nation grappling with its violent past and uncertain future. Coetzee's stark prose, psychological depth, and moral ambiguity make Disgrace one of the most significant works of contemporary literature. Part 1. Urban Fall from Grace. David Lurie is a 52-year-old professor of communications and romantic poetry at a technical university in Cape Town. Twice divorced and emotionally detached, he lives a life of routine and controlled desires. His physical needs are met by weekly visits to a prostitute named Soraya, but when she abruptly ends their arrangement, he becomes restless. Lurie soon becomes infatuated with one of his students, Melanie Isaacs, a young, beautiful woman. He initiates a sexual relationship that is ethically fraught and coercive. Melanie's reluctance is evident, but Lurie ignores the implications, believing in the romantic idea of passion as justification. The affair ends badly. Melanie accuses him of harassment, and a formal inquiry is launched at the university. Rather than defend himself or show contrition, Lurie arrogantly admits to the affair and refuses to apologize in terms dictated by the committee. His academic career ends in disgrace. Part 2. Rural Reckoning. Lurie leaves Cape Town to stay with his daughter, Lucy, who lives on a smallholding in the Eastern Cape. Lucy, a lesbian and self-sufficient woman, runs a small farm with dogs and produces flowers for local markets. She shares the land with Petrus, a black South African who works the farm and gradually begins acquiring ownership. Initially, Lurie sees the countryside as an escape from scandal and a place of retreat. He is critical of Lucy's modest, rustic life and skeptical of her trust in Petrus. He also volunteers at a local animal shelter where he helps euthanize unwanted dogs, a role that becomes a symbol of moral humility and human compassion. However, the rural calm is shattered when three black men, apparently known to Petrus, invade Lucy's farm. They beat and lock David in the bathroom, set him on fire, and gang rape Lucy. The incident marks a turning point in the novel. Lurie wants justice, legal accountability, and a return to order. But Lucy refuses to report the rape, suggesting that she accepts it as a consequence of historical tensions and land conflict. She decides to stay on the farm and even considers becoming Petrus's wife or dependent to ensure her safety. This moral and philosophical rift between father and daughter deepens. Lurie, once a man of status and entitlement, must confront his impotence, physically, socially, and morally, in the face of changing power dynamics. Part 3. Ethical and Existential Collapse. Lurie returns briefly to Cape Town but finds himself increasingly out of place. He tries to apologize to Melanie's family, attempts to write an opera on Byron and Teresa Guiccioli, and finds no solace in the life he once led. Back on the farm, Petrus continues to rise in power, preparing for a land celebration and asserting his role as landowner. Lucy is now pregnant from the rape, yet she insists on keeping the child and remaining where she is. Lurie struggles to understand her passivity, which he sees as surrender, but she frames as atonement or acceptance in a new South Africa where whites must yield and coexist on new terms. By the novel's end, Lurie is transformed. He continues working at the animal shelter, treating the dogs with dignity in death. In the final scene, he chooses to euthanize a dog he had grown attached to, symbolizing his acceptance of loss, powerlessness, and a new ethical order. Character analysis. David Lurie. David is the central figure whose disgrace unfolds in multiple dimensions: sexual, professional, paternal, racial, and philosophical. Initially arrogant and emotionally aloof, he embodies the privileged white male authority that once defined apartheid-era intellectual life. His seduction of Melanie exposes his flawed view of love and power. He treats the affair as a literary or aesthetic experience, ignoring Melanie's discomfort. His refusal to apologize signifies his commitment to personal autonomy but also his moral blindness. As the novel progresses, David is stripped of his status. In the rural setting, his intellectualism is useless, and he becomes physically vulnerable. His inability to protect Lucy or enact justice forces a re-evaluation of masculinity, fatherhood, and ethics. Through his work at the animal shelter and his relationship with Lucy, he gradually undergoes a transformation, not toward heroism, but toward humility. His final act of letting go of the dog and his former self suggests a fragile redemption. Lucy Lurie. Lucy represents the new South Africa, a place of uncertainty, compromise, and confrontation. Her decision to live modestly, partner with Petrus, and remain on the land, even after her brutal assault, reflects her belief in reconciliation through submission. Her rape is one of the most disturbing parts of the novel, but Coetzee refuses to frame her solely as a victim. Lucy's choice to stay, to bear the child, and to accept the shifting power structures is complex. She offers an alternative to her father's moral absolutism, one that prioritizes survival and coexistence over vengeance. Lucy's dignity and resilience challenge David's worldview. In some ways, she becomes the novel's moral center, quietly embracing a difficult ethical stance that transcends her personal trauma. Petrus. Petrus begins as a subservient worker but gradually asserts ownership, power, and autonomy. His ambiguous relationship with the rapists, possibly colluding with them or turning a blind eye, underscores the fragility of post-apartheid reconciliation. To David, Petrus is inscrutable and dangerous. To Lucy, he represents the future, a new kind of social order in which whites must adapt or perish. Petrus's rise from servant to landowner is a metaphor for South Africa's transformation. Themes and analysis. 1. Power and disempowerment. The title Disgrace captures the central theme of power lost. David's fall from academic respectability parallels the decline of white authority in post-apartheid South Africa. His sense of entitlement is eroded, first through public scandal, then through physical violence, and finally through moral reckoning. Lucy's rape and her response further complicate this theme. She sees her violation not as a personal crime alone but as part of a larger historical retribution. Her submission is not weakness but a form of survival in a society where traditional power structures have been reversed. 2. Post-apartheid South Africa. The novel is a stark reflection of a country in transition. Violence, uncertainty, and racial tension are pervasive. Coetzee does not romanticize the new South Africa. Instead, he presents its realities: crime, land conflict, and racial distrust, without clear solutions. Petrus's rise symbolizes black empowerment, while David's decline reflects the disorientation of whites who once held dominance. The novel raises difficult questions about guilt, reparations, and coexistence without offering easy answers. 3. Gender and sexual politics. David's actions toward Melanie are steeped in patriarchal assumptions. He sees himself as a connoisseur of beauty and passion, failing to see the coercive nature of his relationship with her. Melanie's silence during and after the act speaks volumes about her lack of agency. Lucy's rape, while horrific, is not framed as a simple crime but as a symbolic act. David wants to pursue justice, but Lucy refuses, choosing to remain on the land and bear the consequences. Coetzee invites readers to consider the intersections of gender, race, and power, and how women often bear the brunt of societal upheaval. 4. Ethics and redemption. The novel questions what it means to atone or find redemption. David refuses to confess to the university on its terms, believing that public apology is meaningless. Later, however, he confronts real shame, when he cannot protect his daughter or avenge her. His work with dogs, creatures often viewed as disposable, becomes his way of engaging with dignity, empathy, and mortality. He learns to care for the voiceless, to accept suffering, and to relinquish control. This shift from entitlement to humility is perhaps the most hopeful aspect of the novel. 5. Human versus animal. The novel frequently compares human and animal existence. David begins by viewing dogs as lesser beings, but by the end, he performs their euthanasia with care. This transition mirrors his ethical journey, from detachment to compassion. The line between civilization and savagery blurs. The violence of the rape is no more or less animalistic than David's earlier seduction of Melanie. Coetzee uses animals to challenge human assumptions about superiority, morality, and suffering. 6. Language, literature, and the limits of art. David's failed opera on Byron represents the limitations of literature in the face of real-world suffering. His romantic ideals, once a source of identity, become obsolete in the face of brutality. Coetzee, himself a master of language, seems to question the value of aesthetics when confronted with injustice and trauma. The novel subtly critiques liberal humanism and its failure to engage meaningfully with political realities. David's journey from academic discourse to raw experience mirrors this critique. Conclusion. J M Coetzee's Disgrace is a haunting, complex novel that dissects the personal and political aftermath of profound social change. Through David Lurie's downfall and Luce's moral stance, the novel examines disgrace in its many forms: sexual, social, ethical, and national. Coetzee refuses to offer resolution or moral clarity. Instead, he presents a world where old certainties have collapsed, and individuals must navigate their own paths through ambiguity and pain. The novel's sparse prose, symbolic depth, and emotional gravity make it a powerful meditation on loss, transformation, and the painful birth of a new ethical consciousness. Disgrace is not just a story of one man's fall, it is a mirror held to a fractured society, compelling its readers to confront uncomfortable truths and reckon with the enduring legacies of power, shame, and history.